Welcome back to The Explainer. I am incredibly excited to have you here today because we are diving into a truly fascinating historical mystery. We're looking at a story packed with political intrigue, intense courtroom drama, and a ruler whose profound sense of justice literally changed the course of history. It's an absolute masterclass in how to handle prejudice. So get comfortable, keep your eyes focused, and let's unravel the extraordinary life of Ashamah, the just king of Abyssinia. Okay, so take a look at this exquisite calligraphy. It reads Al-Najashi, which was actually the royal title for the king of Abyssinia. His real name was Ashamah bin Abjar. Now here is the huge historical mystery that kicks off our whole story. When this foreign Christian king passed away in the year 630 CE, the Prophet Muhammad, who was living hundreds of miles away in Medina, did something completely unprecedented. He gathered his companions and performed an absentee funeral prayer for him. Just think about that for a second. It was an unparalleled honor. But why? Why offer this ultimate tribute to a monarch of a totally different land? Well, to understand how Ashamah earned that kind of immense respect, we have to rewind a bit. Part 1. The absentee prayer for a just king, a unique historical honor. Part 2. Ashamah, from exile to throne, a tumultuous path to power. You see, Ashamah wasn't just handed the crown on a silver platter. His early years were, frankly, an absolute roller coaster of betrayal, exile, and sudden tragedy. It went like this. Step 1. His father, the sitting king, is brutally assassinated by political rivals, who then put Ashamah's uncle on the throne. Step 2. Young Ashamah is actually raised by that uncle. But as he grows up, his sharp intellect and commanding presence absolutely terrify the paranoid nobles. So they force the uncle to sell the boy into exile. He literally becomes a royal orphan, cast out of his own country. But then, and you can't make this up, step 3 happens. In a crazy twist of fate, shortly after Ashamah is exiled, his uncle is struck and killed in a freak lightning storm. The kingdom descends into total chaos. The nobles panic. And, in a massive stroke of irony, they realize they have to scramble, apologize, and urgently recall Ashamah from exile to place the crown on the head of the exact same boy they just banished. Now, the absolutely crucial point here is that Ashamah didn't return bitter or tyrannical. As you can see from our source text here, he ruled with justice, wisdom, and filled the land with good, avoiding oppression. His painful past created a ruler deeply, deeply committed to absolute fairness. He knew exactly what it meant to be wronged, to be oppressed, to be a helpless exile, and he vowed that in his lands, no one would ever be wronged. It's a powerful reminder for us today that the best leaders let their own past pain teach them empathy, not cruelty. And honestly, that sets the perfect stage for our main event. Part 3. Muslim migration and Quraysh's plot, seeking asylum. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles to the north in Mecca, a new faith was facing brutal oppression. The early Muslims were suffering severe religious persecution from the ruling Quraysh tribe. Desperate for safety, the Prophet Muhammad advised them to seek asylum in Abyssinia, specifically because it was ruled by a king who does not wrong anyone. And that brings us to this number right here, 80. That's the approximate number of highly vulnerable men and women who undertook this incredibly dangerous first migration. They left absolutely everything behind, crossed the Red Sea, and relied entirely on the legendary reputation of a foreign king they had never even met. But, of course, their enemies, the Quraysh, weren't just going to let them slip away. They dispatched a high-level delegation led by a really cunning diplomat named Amr bin al-As. Now, Amr's political strategy was a brilliant two-part trap. First, he aggressively bribed the Abyssinian generals and bishops with lavish, expensive gifts to get them on his side. Then, second, the plan was to appeal directly to the king, but not by asking for a favor. No, by framing these refugees as a dangerous, radical threat to the state's traditional religion, hoping to get them deported before they could even utter a single word in their defense. Part 4. The Confrontation. Jafar before Nahashi, a high-stakes hearing. This brings us to what is easily one of the most intense courtroom dramas in history. Amr presents his case, the bribed generals nod along, and they demand the extradition. But King Ashamah, remembering his own dark days as an exile, slams the brakes. He outright refuses to hand these refugees over without giving them a fair trial and hearing their side of the story. Notice the stark contrast here. On one side, we've got Amr's political manipulation, painting the Muslims as rebellious youths who invented a radical new religion and abandoned their forefathers. But on the other side, we have the Muslim representative, Jafar bin Abi Talib, offering a sincere, spiritual defense. He doesn't play politics at all. he talks about transformation. Just look at this powerful quote from Ja'far's defense. "We were a people of ignorance until God sent a messenger commanding us to speak the truth, keep promises, and be kind to neighbors." I mean, wow. Ja'far beautifully articulated the moral and social revolution their new faith demanded. He made it perfectly clear. They weren't extremists trying to topple a state. They were simply people trying to live ethical, honest lives, and they were being tortured for it. Well, the king is definitely intrigued, but he needs to know a bit more about this theology. So he asks Ja'far to recite something from their revelations, and Ja'far makes a brilliant choice. He recites verses from the Quranic chapter of Maryam, which translates to Mary. He recites the exact verses detailing the miraculous story of Mary and the virgin birth of Jesus. The historical sources tell us that the pure beauty and reverence of this recitation actually moved King Ashamah and his bishops to open tears, like literally soaking their beards. And this brilliantly illustrates King Ashamah's profound open-mindedness. Through his tears, he declares, "Indeed, this and what Jesus brought come from the same niche." He instantly recognized the shared divine origin in their message. So he turns right to the Quraysh delegation, flatly refuses the extradition, and promises the Muslims full protection in his lands. Part 5. The Faith Test and Najashi's Islam. The ultimate question. Now, Amr was a master political operative, right? So he doesn't just give up. He returns to the royal court the very next day with a lethal theological trap completely designed to pit the Christian king against his Muslim guests. He goads the king into posing this terrifying question: "What do you say about Jesus, son of Mary?" Talk about high stakes. The Muslims were totally cornered. If they told their Islamic truth that Jesus was a mighty prophet and not the literal Son of God, they seriously risked offending the deeply Christian king and his powerful bishops. Their asylum could be revoked in a second. But lying about their faith, that was entirely unthinkable. So Ja'far steps forward and delivers an uncompromising, completely honest answer. He says, "He is the servant of God, his messenger, his spirit, and his word cast into Mary." He delivered the pure Islamic perspective, holding his breath to see how this powerful king would react to a doctrine that directly challenged his empire's official dogma. What happens next is nothing short of legendary. Ashamah reaches down to the ground, picks up a small stick, and says, "Jesus did not exceed what you said by the length of this stick." Even with the furious, audible snorts of his own generals and bishops standing right there around him, Ashamah validated their faith. He chose truth and justice over political convenience. He officially returned the bribes to the Quraysh and cemented the Muslims' absolute safety. Part 6. Continuous support and honorable end, a legacy of justice. Let's see how all of this builds into the final chapter of his life. The rest of Ashamah's reign was marked by a profound spiritual and personal evolution that forever intertwined his legacy with the history of Islam. First up, diplomacy. He successfully quells a domestic rebellion fueled by nobles who were furious about his protection of the Muslims. Second, faith. Deeply moved by the Quran and his ongoing interactions with the refugees, he officially embraces Islam. Third, alliance. He becomes a vital long-distance ally to the Prophet Muhammad, even brokering a marriage for him. And finally, legacy. He passes away, leaving behind an absolutely incredible legacy. I want to pause on that third point for a second, because there's a beautiful little anecdote here that perfectly reveals his character. Habiba, a Muslim woman who had migrated to Abyssinia, was tragically left stranded and isolated when her husband passed away. Hearing of her hardship, the Prophet Muhammad sought to marry and protect her. But it was the king, Ashamah himself, who stepped in to act as the official proxy, directly delivering the proposal to this highly vulnerable widow in his land. And Ashamah didn't just broker the marriage, he demonstrated unbelievable personal generosity. Out of his own royal treasury, he paid a massive dowry of 400 gold dinars on behalf of the prophet. He wanted to ensure that this once stranded widow was treated with absolute dignity and honor before arranging her safe travel all the way back to Medina. Which brings us to the end of today's explainer, and leaves us with this final, provocative thought. How often does history remember a leader whose greatest legacy wasn't a bloody conquest, but simply giving a fair hearing to persecuted strangers? King Ashamah's life is a masterclass in the timeless power of justice, open dialogue, and finding common ground. He was a man who let his own pain teach him fairness, and in doing so, earned the unprecedented, eternal respect of a prophet. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Keep asking questions, keep studying the evidence, and I'll see you in the next explainer.